welcome to another video from Berkshire Guitar Amplifier Repairs in Reading, England. Stuart Smith with you as always, and today it's a Fender HotRod Deluxe. This amp had been left on for a week, I believe out of standby. So basically the mains was on and the amp was out of standby, left on in a studio for a week. When they came back a week later and found it, it was on, and when he turned it out of standby he smelt burning. So don't like the sound of that very much, so I'm not even going to turn it on. I'm going to take the back off and see if we can see if there's been any damage on the inside. If there hasn't, we'll bring it up very tentatively, I think, on the variac and see what happens. Okay, let's get the back off. Here we are around the back. It all looks absolutely pristine. The electrolytic capacitors there are good. No, oh, there is some leakage on that one. Look, that capacitor there is leaking. That's going to need changing. The other two are okay. I might see if he wants them all done. So look at this one. That one's okay. So hopefully you can see that that little bit of leakage there coming out of the end. They're absolute rubbish, these IC caps. I've said it many times before. Fender saved themselves 3p a cap, no doubt, by putting those in. Usual saving a few pennies at the expense of the integrity of the amplifier. I never understand it, but there you go. And by the way, I have been in production engineering, so I do know how much money matters. No smell at all, so I've stuck my nose in there. Not the slightest smell of anything burning. Power valves, this one looks like it's been taking a little bit more current than that one. If you see that the writing's slightly more discoloured than that. Anyway, I'm going to take those valves out before I turn it on, and do you know what, I'm not even sure I want to turn it on with that capacitor in that state. I think I'm just going to change that capacitor on spec. It needs doing anyway. Take the valves out and then bring it up on the variac and see if we've got HT and that sort of thing. Make sure there's nothing burning or anything like that. The mains transformer could have got very hot and might even have damaged a winding or something on there, so we need to check that. Anyway, I don't want to turn it on with that capacitor leaking like that, so we'll just quickly change that one and then push on. Okay, I've replaced the cap and I'm going to bring this up slowly on the variac. So the amp is on, there are no power valves in. I just want to make sure that this amp will power up okay and we don't get any horrible burning smells or anything. So I'll just bring this up to, I don't know, US mains voltage. So the lights on. Wouldn't expect to hear anything out the speakers, there's no power valves in. And I think I'm just going to now measure the HT here to make sure we've got some HT on these caps. Alright, let's see what we've got here. This one for instance, yeah, 240 volts, that's fine. 260 there, that's okay. What was that? 260, yep, all looking fine. Can't feel anything getting hot or anything, so I'll bring the voltage up a bit more. Check again here. Now we've got 360 volts on there, 360 there, 330 there, and down on the preamp side 300, a little bit lower. All looking good so far. Yep, the preamp valves are alight, so that's good. I think I can risk full voltage. So I'll just bypass the variac and we now are up to full voltage on here. Here we go, let's check again. Full HT, look, 470 volts, 470, 435, so I'm fairly happy with that. I've checked the power valves on my tester and they seem to be okay. So I think I'm just going to turn off and pop those in and see if we get any joy from this amp. It would be nice if it does work, because the customer will be very pleased that he hasn't totally trashed his amp. I haven't checked the bias on this, I'll do that in a moment. There we go. Alright, well, moment of truth, let's I think I'll plug a guitar in case we get lucky. There we go, out to standby. Oh, I can hear stuff. Okay, it's a little bit crackly. Bit of sort of fried egg sound going on there, but basically Houston, we have an amp. Well, that's good news, because you know, he said he smelled something very, very hot, maybe even burning. There's no sign of that whatsoever, and this amp, I think, is actually good to go. Right, so I'm going to turn it off again now and do the bias on the amp, just to make sure that these valves are running about right. They're both equally warm. Very useful test to be able to touch a valve when it's not too hot, of course. And if you can tell immediately they're equal temperatures, which means they're pulling pretty much equal currents. Of course, when the amp's been on a little while, you can't do that because it's just simply too hot to touch the valve. And if that's the case, I use my trusty little infrared meter here to just point it at the valves and get a reading of the temperature, and that can tell you quite a lot too about what's going on. Anyway, let's pop a bias meter in there and see what it's doing. Go. Turn it back on again. (31 milliamps at 440 volts, 33, 34, creeping up a bit obviously as the valve warms up. 35 milliamps, don't know whether you can read that on there. Yeah, maybe just about 33-ish, 33, 34 milliamps at 440 volts. I know from experience that's about right, but I'll get out my Weber bias calculator, which is on the Ted Weber site. And this is a great little utility. It's www.tedweber.co.uk or com, I'm not sure. So basically you just enter in the valve type, so it's a 6L6 there, and it's AB, and the plate voltage was about 444. Calculate bias, and up it comes. Oh, 47 milliamps, that goes a bit out there. So this is biased on the cool side at the moment. So I will, oh, it's gone up actually whilst we've been sitting there to 39 milliamps, 40. Okay. It's not too far off. I'll leave that to settle a bit and see what it settles down at. I normally bias things a little cooler than the recommended, just to save everything getting baking hot. Okay, well, assuming that sits there and behaves itself, we're good to go. I'm going to put the amp back together. That's the result. There are all sorts of things we can do on this amp. You know, if the customer wants it, and I often get people texting me saying, you should have changed those resistors, you should have put those out on away from the board, you should have changed all these capacitors whilst you were in there, and all that sort of thing. I always say the same thing to those people. I say, look, I work for the customer. This is not my amplifier, and if the customer doesn't want to spend a lot of money doing all this, then I won't do it. And if they do say, yep, fine, do it, money no object, then I'll do it. So I've yet to speak to the customer on that account. Normally they just want the problem fixed and anything obviously wrong with it fixing. They don't have a lot of money, musicians, in case you don't know. Okay, there you go. I'll leave it at that for the moment. I telephoned the client and he was more than happy to go ahead and replace all the electrolytic capacitors, so I've replaced all those for there, and I also took the board out and checked the joints on the back of these resistors, and all 4 of them were dry joint. Quite surprised the amp worked actually, so I redid those resistor joints. They'll be fine. I've ordered up some 470 ohm wire wound resistors, not these cement things, and I think in future I'm just going to bite the bullet and replace, anytime I see this, I'm going to replace it with some wire wound resistors stood off the board, some 5-watt resistors. Several people have suggested that I do that. I've kind of resisted up to now because it's quite a, it's not trivial taking the board out. You have to take off all the furniture and all the screws and lever the board down and bend it forward. It's not easy, but this is such a known fault area here that I think I'll do that. And if they go, that's the plus and minus 15 volts for the op amps and things, so it affects all kinds of things, including the relay switching. Anyway, so there you go. The other thing I did on this amp was to change V1, which is a ECC83 normally, for a 12AY7. What this does is to reduce the gain of the first stage and allows you to get the volume control off of number 1. Normally you're deafening the neighbours at this kind of level, and when you put a 12AY7 in, this comes up to more like this for the same sort of volume. The 12AY7 is a low gain version of the ECC83. Some people put ECC81s in there, but an ECC81 is not a low gain ECC83. It just happens to have lower gain than an ECC83. So if you want to reduce the gain, pop in a 12AY7. Okay, there you go. Fairly short and sweet video. A few interesting learning points I think there, otherwise I wouldn't have bothered putting it up, I don't think. I think he was quite lucky not to cause some serious damage to the amp, leaving it on for a week, but it seems to have survived, and I've seen a lot of those amplifiers, and it's usually the same sort of problem, changing the HT caps and sorting out those 2 power resistors. I would say covers 80% of the work I do on those amplifiers. Well, there you go, another one under my belt, and thanks very much for watching. I'll see you on the next video.